Hey, whoa, geez, strong start. Um, yeah, g'day. This is Rangadad. Not financial advice, just the way I'm looking at the market. Might be a bit slow today. Just been long days trying to get some stuff out for work before Christmas. So shout out to all the consultants that have deadlines before Christmas, and shout out to the ones that get handed work by big companies to do over the Christmas break. Oh, can you have this done by the time I get back from my holidays? Yeah, no worries. That happens quite a bit. Fortunately, I've managed to avoid that this year, but big lead up into it anyway. Okay. Good news and bad news today. Bad news is we did have not as big a rip as I was kind of hoping. The good news is there is still some strength in this, and I'll get into why. And when I say that, I think we will hit another all-time high at some stage in the next couple of months. There isn't a need to sort of be in mass panic yet, but it's just a matter of when you want to start buying back in. So I did actually buy back in a little bit down around, actually, I think it was around here yesterday. Sold back out when I saw it rolling over here. Just wasn't happy with that setup going into the EMAs that were there at the time. And I'll probably have a nibble down here, actually. I'll probably start averaging in after this video. But yeah, liquidity-wise, or liquidations-wise, we need to go out a little bit to get into the decent levels. Keep going. Go out of the month. All right. I'd be surprised if we don't sweep this. So 95, 200. It just isn't a lot in here to go back into. If we do come back down, I think we're going to smash through this. I don't think this will pull us up. I think we'll probably potentially get down into the low 80s. It will be interesting. That obviously is an area of interest, but at the moment, there's only some minor signs of sort of another potential rip, not necessarily a bottom yet. Just have a quick look on the liquidation map. So on the daily, we're getting heavy on the short side. We'll just skip straight to the 30-day. This is looking a lot better for a potential upside. There's no two ways about that. Somewhere back into the 92 sort of area wouldn't surprise me. Just to sweep a lot of this. That's not a bad level. Just want to have a look. Yeah. I mean, if we come all the way down into the 90s, that'll look very nasty at that point. But yeah, that's potential reversal point around 90K. Potentially a little bit lower, just into the 80s, just to freak people out. Not necessarily going to get there though. I guess the argument for doing so would be we're already heading down pretty hard. There's not that many shorts coming into the charts yet, like comparatively to previous drops. We may just keep going further so we can suck in more shorts, get rid of a lot of this long liquidity, and then move back to the upside. I just want to go to the ETFs now. We're actually, where's IBIT? There. So BlackRock's ETF is still in the positive. So they're still buying up. They're buying this dip. And that is very much a positive sign for this dip. Okay. Yeah, I'd at this stage, I think we'll find a bottom before once people start freaking out, we're going to find a bottom. But these guys are probably going to be buying up the whole way down. Just going to the super charts. CVD is still to the downside. I'd like to see a turnaround in this to the upside, particularly the spot. The spot was sort of leading the way in terms of predicting this dip, and it is still trending to the downside. We could even get to a point where we actually flip the funding rate into a negative value. I think if we do that, that would be pretty close to a bottom. We haven't actually seen that since the start of this whole rally. So literally, right at the bottoms here. Even at the top, people were selling that funding rate. People were trying to sell the top. So no significant signs of turnaround there, I would say. This is still red too, so no one's really buying this up in big volumes yet. So that's kind of a bit of a concern. On the flip side to that, if we actually come in and look at a few of the ETFs, I'd be a little bit surprised if this was a sell, and I'd be even more surprised if that was a sell. It could be like these guys might have seen it go down and might be just a bit late to the party and just sell it all. That's the biggest trade on that ETF, the Bitwise ETF, in its history. So something to keep in mind there. Someone's either getting out big time or they're getting in big time. Same thing here. Interesting. That's a pretty good buy if that bottom's there. So this is energy sector. And the reason I'm interested in this is if we just go to today, there are a couple of ETFs that got some pretty big bids on them. So XLE, XLF, so the BitQ, that's why I had that up. It showed up in there. FBTC as well. We'll have a look at that in a second. But there's people starting to buy the dip in some of these ETFs. And XLE is one that's been dropping for quite a long time. And to have the 13th largest trade right in the bottom there as it's sort of starting to work its way back up, that's a pretty good sign that we're starting to get some interest at these levels. People are starting to buy up. So XLF financials, that's a pretty massive bid right at the bottom there. Fuck, these guys are good at knowing where the thing bottoms out, aren't they? So financials getting a bid is generally a good thing as well. What you don't want to see is them then selling a rip, but so far that's not bad. FBTC, so Fidelity, it's getting a fair bit of interest around the bottom here. Interesting though that no one seemed to sell the top. So either they've just held on and they're buying more on the dip, or these guys are panic selling, which could be either. Honestly, don't have a decent read on that. Just go to the 10 largest trades. Come on. Man. All right. I'll leave that for a sec. The other one is Coinbase on the standard shares. It got 2 decent bids at the bottom here. That suggests we may be close to a bottom as well. Oh, they've finally refreshed. Yeah, no difference. The leveraged one hasn't actually gotten a bid yet, though. So just beware of that. It could just be these guys are averaging in on the way down. So I'd like to see a bid on the 2x long Coinbase ETF. Move over to CoinAnk. People are still moving BTC onto and ETH onto exchanges. That's actually hard to read that because it's pretty constant. All I know is that the amount of BTC on exchanges is still at quite low values. So that's another good thing. If that was starting to tick up quite a bit, then we'd be a little bit more concerned. No huge bottoming signal here yet either. I mean, obviously we got pretty red here, so might take something special to actually bring this up as a darker red than that, because it's all relative on this chart. But could be getting close. I thought 97k might actually be a bit of support, like a bit more support than what it actually was. It did bounce a little bit off there, but smashed straight through it as well. So, key levels here down to 93. There's a fair block of orders in there, down to 93, low 93s. And then it's just whether or not it wants to come into this area. So down to 89, potentially you're going to have a lot of orders come in here, I think, if we're getting down to 89. So it may sweep into the 87s. And then, to be fair, there's not a lot down to 80k. These guys here are pretty keen on a 79, 80k, which could be the case. It's just I would expect a bigger rip before we get down into that. If we get down into that. But that 80k is about a 30% drop from the high, which once you start dropping these sort of numbers, that's, not unexpected. So we've done about 12% so far. Okay. Open interest has dropped slightly, but interesting that it is quite high here. Not a lot of sells coming in either yet, like big sell orders. So I think at the moment it's pretty much running for these orders down here and to get rid of those leverage longs. It's not necessarily got that much to attract it back up. Like there was a little bit in here, but there is a little bit there, but it's not huge, I wouldn't think. But these guys here still think it's going up to at least 110. I think they're probably right as well. It's just where's the bottom on this current one. So I guess the whole thinking there is it's okay to buy the dip. It's not the end of the world yet. There will be another pump based on what I'm seeing here. Just go over to Sentiment Trader, and this is something I've been pointing out a little bit lately. Starting to get a bit more interest in smart money as the S&P is dipping. That's a really good sign. So, and retail's been flushed pretty hard with those liquidations. I wonder if the brokers are still holding the bags or not, because literally the day before we had the big drop, they dropped the leverage the leverage levels that you can have, just so they weren't stuck holding their bags in a flash crash, and then we flash crashed. So they were seeing a lot of leverage in the market, and typically when there is that much leverage in the market, we had a like 40% of households in the US were in the stock market before this dump. So that's actually, I think that was all-time highs. So, once those sort of things happen, it's a pretty good signal that we're going to have a bit of a correction. That and that global liquidity divergence was some pretty good signals. It's just timing it with those values is really tricky. Move over to Bitcoin now. So it's finding some support here on the 1 hour 800, which is the 4 hour 200. I do actually expect a bounce here off that. That's typically a pretty strong level. Now, there isn't really any vector candles or anything in here for it to grab. If it does break through there, that 93 level, 93 and a half, probably a little bit lower, will attract price. And to be honest with you, there's not a lot. Like there's no real vectors on the on the 1 hour that are much lower than that. You actually do come pretty far down, potentially into 81. This one here might be around 88,600. That and do it. There is some in here, but again, we don't have to come into these yet. It's just, that is around the 30% drop, potentially into that sort of level. Yeah, I mean, you can draw those support levels all day. It's not going to drop straight to that level, I don't think. And as you can see from the charts, we did clear out a lot of the lower down long leverage longs before we went on this run. So we're 50% way through this candle. We do have some stopping volume here and some buying off these levels. Be watching this one pretty closely. It seems like a pretty good level for it. Momentum is kind of starting to tick back to the upside. At the same time, the energy is being expended here. Still ticking up, so we could run a little bit more. But we're getting into some pretty decent levels. I'd like to see a break of this line here to turn back to the upside. Cyclic RSI looks like it's actually not putting in a bullish divergence on the 1 hour. So yeah, not much to see here. Yeah, it looks like it actually wants to break that level. It can look like that halfway through a candle though. Like you can always reverse that. That's why you wait till the candle closes. But we're far enough down now that you're not going to be really missing out on much if you just wait for a decent turnaround signal. So bullish divergences on the 1 hour, RSIs are a pretty good sign that we might be bottoming. But yeah, interested to see what happens there. Yeah, that RSI is pretty low as well in the 15-minute. If we do turn around here on the regular RSI, it will be a bullish divergence on the 15-minute. kind of. Kind of. It is versus here, but not necessarily versus that one. So mix, a little bit of a mixed signal there on the 15-minute. So this is the other good sign. We're finally starting to get some interest from the BTC USD long. Not a hell of a lot of interest yet, but this is a pretty good sign. So we want to see these guys accumulating, and generally they don't start right at the bottom. Generally they start on the way down. So this is suggesting we could get a little bit further down. But that's a good sign that there is still interest there. So I do still think that we will go on another leg up, but at this stage, like this here is looking like it wants a 30% correction. My way of thinking about it. BBWP is increasing. Stochastic momentum is to the downside, and it hasn't even hit halfway yet. We've broken the trend line on the stochastic momentum as well. So there was a bit of a trend line up sort of through here. You could argue that we haven't. It really depends where you take that particular line. Trend lines on these sort of charts aren't great, but generally you're coming down that hard out of the bullish control zone and you got BBWP increasing, that's typically going to lead to a pretty decent drop. Now, if we look at this level in here, bottom of that wick is 80,400. That's going to look pretty nasty, but it kind of looks like this might be a more protracted drop in terms of time. So it's not looking like it's going to be a great Christmas for crypto, but I suspect if you manage to pick some up on the way down, first 2 quarters of next year are probably going to look a lot better. It's good that we're leaving vectors behind here. Like, this is not a bad thing at all. First support may actually be around the value area low here. So again, that 93, low 93s is sort of coming up, but even high 91s to pick up that 50 EMA. Maybe not today, but tomorrow I think that could find some support. And then what you're probably going to be looking at, it may try and rip either, like it could be tomorrow or the day after, but potentially you're looking for it to rip back up and probably find some resistance around that high. But you want it to put in a higher low and then start working its way up like this. That's the ideal scenario. What may actually happen is more like this. Could even go up into here actually, and then pull back down into this level over time, and then we start working our way back up. That's probably what the chart's going to look like. Just based on what I'm seeing, the only spanner in that is BlackRock's still just buying shit tons of it. So that's kind of the caveat around where we'll find the low. It's really hard to pick, given that there is still quite a bit of interest on the way down from the BlackRock ETFs. But as I said, they're probably going to be buying the dip the whole way down. It's just this momentum is probably something to really look out for. Interesting thing too today is global liquidity is it's flat. We didn't have any follow through to the upside yet. You kind of want to see global liquidity actually bouncing, and that hasn't happened yet. All right. Solana retested that bottom pivot there and moves to the downside. it's going to struggle. But one thing is we are getting pretty low on this now in terms of the RSI. Potentially got a little bit further to run, probably into the 173 level. 173 should probably a little bit lower actually. We'll probably break this level, come back into here a little bit. 168, 170, and then hopefully Solana might find a bottom there. Remember, Solana did run before Bitcoin. It ran harder when Bitcoin was starting to run. So looking for a turnaround in Solana as well. I think that could be a pretty good sign that the rest of the market's going to turn around as well. XRP is interesting. So it's got a bit of a different scenario here. $1.90 on XRP might find a bottom. But you do have the pivot down here as well at $1.71. Potentially a little bit lower, $1.60. They're probably key levels. If we get down to even $2 is not a bad little nibble area for XRP, and then $1.70, $1.50, $1.47's not a bad level either. So we'll come into this support here. Can run a little bit more, but again, you got to be watching for the bounces here and where they're selling from. So that's why having a nibble on the way down and then potentially selling the rip, if you see it rolling over, then it's not a bad play. Higher time frames are probably the play here as well, unless obviously you're day trading it. Just be careful with leverage on in these sort of conditions. Just look at Sol on the daily here. Interesting level for it to bounce from. That has been support in the past twice. I'd be a little bit surprised if it finishes there. Just stochastic momentum and BBWP is still aligned to the downside. Do have some vector candles in here, so 166 level, potentially into this level here, so 160. 160 is probably not a bad level, to be honest. Yeah, not bad at all. XRP will be interesting because there aren't actually a lot of daily vectors in here. It may hold up better than the majority of crypto at the moment. It is BBWP and stochastic momentum are suggesting that there's more to come, but it has not flushed like everything else yet. A lot of these alts have got a little bit further to come too, I think. So it's just accumulation at the moment. I think that most of these are still a decent buy on the way down. Some of the alts might find a base relatively soon. Hype will probably come back a little bit more, probably to that 50 on the daily. All right, let's have a look at the general markets. Qs had a little bit of a bounce in after hours trade, but has retraced that. Again, interestingly, BBWP hasn't actually spiked yet. Stochastic momentum is to the downside, again, to draw another trend line, which I don't pay a huge amount of credence to, especially when you're dropping this quickly. Like similar speed of drop here did lead to quite a bit of follow through. And from very similar BBWP levels, So just be aware of that. Yeah, it looks like it wants to find support on the 20 moving average. This is a 20 now, not a 13. Just changed that yesterday. So just be aware of that. But it's broken through on the US 100. So different markets, different levels here. It's interesting rejection off that 20 daily on the Nasdaq. So you would expect that to come back a bit more yet. And there is a gap down here as well. Level on that. That could be a pretty good level for Nasdaq to come back into. I don't know what's happening with the trend line. Oh, yeah. Let's see, we'll just extend that out where it was. That's an interesting one to see if we find support here. Could actually trudge sideways and then just bounce from there. But again, a 10% correction once you're down this far. And we do see a lot of 4%, 5% corrections, which is pretty much where we're at now. Even 5.74, that's not a bad little correction, given that people are seemingly buying the dip here. But yeah, it's interesting. Might not get a full 10% here at this stage. Santa rally might not be cancelled yet. It's just doing the flush this week and then might bounce. Not bad levels for stochastic momentum here. Another vector candle on the equal weight though. No, I mean, there's support here at about 89, 88, 89. It's not a bad level there. 200 EMA as well, which it did bounce off here. So maybe a little bit more down tonight. Tonight my time, Friday US time. But it kind of looks like we're getting close. Like there are dip buyers coming into the charts here. That smashed through the 50 moving average and is now retesting it. So that could come down to the 100, which is pretty close to where it bounced before as well. That trend line's obviously broken. I'm going to leave it in there because these trend lines will probably be resistance on the way up. Let's just don't pay huge credence to some of these trend lines, but that's not a bad little level there. Move that down into there. There is support there as well. Yeah, somewhere in there would be a pretty good level. You've got a gap fill here, 576 on the SPY. I think coming further down into that is probably more likely. Probably even a week into that and then a move away would be interesting. You would have hidden bullish divergence on the stochastic momentum too here. If that pulls up before this level, then that would be hidden bullish divergence. Interesting there. Yeah, the equal weight, I do expect that to find some support pretty soon. Maybe another day or so down just to pick up these levels here. It's kind of in no man's land where it's stopped. Yeah, there's a bit of trading through there, but I think somewhere around that 173 is a better level. It is starting to turn around though. So I think we're getting close. Not a bad nibble level. US 500 again, suggesting a little bit more down. IWM, fair bit of volume traded through here, so finding support somewhere around here again would make a lot of sense. IWM is probably going to run the hardest too when it does. XLI, so these things have been dropping for a while. Like that's considered pretty oversold. Yeah, we're not, no divergences really on this, but certainly the measured move on the double top here, if you consider this a double top, is probably pretty close. Getting into some pretty decent levels. Interestingly, the XLY XLP is still pretty high as well, so it's still actually suggesting there's not a lot to be worried about. So KRE has had some bids on it, I believe, yesterday as well. Nearly filled the gap. I do expect that gap to fill. And it is breaking that trend line, so that is a little concerning. But so it could actually fall a little bit further on KRE. But what you want to be looking for here is the bounce. What happens when we do actually bounce? Do we reclaim this trend line and then confirm it, go back up, or does it hit the underside and bounce down? This is really concerning for the overall economy. It's showing that there is some issues in the real estate market. XHB, yeah, this just doesn't look like it wants to stop. Need to see a turnaround in this, actually, I think. But even then, where's it going to bounce to? I don't think it's going to go to new all-time highs. Be very surprised if it did. Semiconductors is holding up pretty well. And again, this is probably signs that this was more of a flush, more of a clean out of some liquidity and some mum and dad investors. And yeah, probably hold this range in here, I'd say. A little bit more down is certainly possible, but I'm not expecting this, given everything else is flushed already, I'm not expecting this to come down to any huge levels. DJT gold is still pushing to the downside. So again, that's been our signal that there's some potential bearishness for a little while. You kind of want to see this turn around as well if you want to see the market go back up. VIX. So VIX is still elevated. Again, this could spike a little bit more, but it's not a bad level here for the VIX. Actually, back. Skew has obviously pulled back. Really interesting that the skew hasn't actually crushed. Like, we haven't had that big a crush on the skew at all. And it'll be interesting to see what that looks like today after the close. Yeah, still need to wait on that. If that's stayed high, if it hasn't broken below this, then I'd actually be reasonably bullish next week. Like, it's going to be a very short trading week, I think, but we could actually get a rally between Christmas, New Year, and then into the new year, obviously. So it's not looking too bad. It was a good flush out of some leverage. Interesting on the FTSE here. So it's picked up this vector candle. Hasn't created, maybe that is going to be a vector candle. Doesn't look like it yet. would be an interesting level to actually bounce here for the FTSE. Again, I'm not a huge fan of these trend lines, but there could be something there. And then it could actually be that it'll come back down into these vectors here. So be a bit careful, but yeah, not a bad level for a bounce if it wants to. Japanese market has held up pretty good, surprisingly. No sort of new high though. It is recovering this vector, so potentially chopped down a little bit. BBWP is still resetting on this, so if stochastic momentum keeps going to the downside, or if it turns around as BBWP is increasing, then that'll actually look quite bullish for the Japanese market. TLT drops straight into this vector candle level, and it's creating its own vector. Interesting doji at the bottom. Only a minute left on the daily. It's hard to call that as being a bottom, but it's looking not too bad. Yeah, it's not looking terrible at the 80 level. We did get a fair bit of interest down at this level previously, so high yield junk is still, that's actually not looking good. So again, that'll probably pull back with the rest of the market. A little bit concerned about this vector in here, that we may actually come back into that level, which means that there may be a protracted move on the markets. Like it might last a little bit longer and with a bit more downside. So again, you kind of want to see turnarounds in these. Same with this bond indicator. It's, yeah, should find some interest soon. Like it should find a bounce reasonably soon. Find it in somewhere around that level. So again, a couple more down days and a bounce would be good. 2-year 10-year is dropping still. When you start to see this dropping hard, that is not a bad sign that we're getting close to that recession call. In here, October 19, that was really close to when we should have been having a recession. Where's 20? Yeah, you see, once it starts to really dip off, then you know you're getting close to that recessionary period. That was mid-June 07. Yeah. Breaking of that level would be pretty nasty, I think, actually. Yeah, yields have come back a little bit on the 2-year, but they're actually pushing forward on the 10-year. So that's the first decent sort of push we've really had. First decent divergence between those two. 2-year still could come up quite a bit, but at this stage, I think it's found a reasonable level that's probably going to want to trade in this region. But 10-year looks like it wants a bit more. Which means investors are they are fleeing. They're starting to prepare for recession, I think. Moving to the longer term bonds. Actually moving out of the long. The yield's going up. Huh. Gold's kind of still just working its way back down. I think that's still a pretty good level for gold. Momentum's Still to the downside, bearish control zone, BBWP is up. It could actually flush a little bit lower. But at this stage, it's just working its way down. Silver versus gold ratio, that needs to find some support here. Otherwise, silver could take a bit of a beating, a bit more of a beating than what it has taken already. Good level for silver would be 27.6, just based on all the touches of that level through these regions. I think that's a pretty good level for silver to base, especially if it's going to not respect this 200 EMA, which it could do. It did close below that and then break back above previously. Like where it's at isn't a bad level either, to be fair. Like you got lots of touches on this level, so they're two pretty decent buy levels for silver, I think. In my opinion, not financial advice, all that jazz. Still haven't closed below this trend line on oil. It's obviously not looking great. Probably coming into a pretty highly traded region. Go. We'll just go from here. Yeah, we're in a pretty highly traded zone. Interesting bounce off the value area higher there. We may see some support here. It will be interesting if oil confirms that break with a move to the upside soon. It is getting a fair bit of selling interest though, those wicks. Just means if we break above these wicks, which is also basically the value area high, then you're potentially going to go on a pretty decent run. This is sort of the last ditch area for oil though. If it tries this area again, you'd expect it to break that. Doesn't have to, obviously we can range for months yet, but it's not looking great for it. Dixie is still pushing higher, so the 108 level was an interesting one for us. But as I said, if it breaks those sort of levels, like there's a top of the wick here that it's sitting right at, which isn't a bad sort of level. Through here, you got pretty good level there where it's rejected off and found support there. I think the next level is probably the 109, 110. As I said the other day, it's somewhere in there is going to be another attractive point for the Dixie. Which, again, if the Dixie keeps running and got an hour to close on this daily, that confirms another break above that, then would expect the push to go up to the 110 mark, which is going to hurt. It's going to hurt stocks and crypto still. So again, would suggest more downside over the next couple of days. Aussie dollar got absolutely belted. Pretty good level for a turnaround though. So yeah, I'll just mark off that. That is a wick vector there. Hopefully we don't get into these levels. That would be pretty nasty. There is a wick vector there though too. Geez, it dropped hard in COVID, didn't it? Wow. 55 is like a 50 read on the Aussie dollar is pretty rare. It hasn't been that low for very long for a long time. Yeah, there's not a lot to bounce back up into here. So 63.3, if we clear that, then it could recover. But at the moment, it's looking like it's probably going to pull back a little bit more with US dollar if US dollar keeps going. Japanese yen has broken that key level. This is going to be interesting. It's whether they let if the Japanese central bank lets this drop down to this level, then I would expect some intervention there, which is probably going to be around the $1.10 mark on the Dixie. Yeah, there is a vector candle up in here, so it looks like the Dixie's going to keep running. Euro USD. So Euro's cheap at the moment for US. That's why there has been a bit of a spike in that today, because people are moving US dollars into euros, and then they're getting a decent rate on the spread there. So the 23-day basically an interest rate on that swap is pretty attractive. So could stay in this area for 23 days or so and see what happens after that. Again, so global liquidity, it finally looks like it is actually trying to base here. We're not seeing any panic though. So that's an interesting sign. Like if you see this spike straight back up, it's probably a panic. Someone's supporting the market somewhere, and you would expect equities to then increase accordingly. Not really seeing that yet. So I think it might just be a general bounce and a general run up on equities. Kind of want to see this turn to the upside though. Green day or two on this wouldn't be a bad thing. This was interesting. So percentage of stocks above 50-day moving average took an absolute belting. So most stocks came under their 50-day moving average on this particular drop. So now we've only got 30% of stocks above their 50-day moving average on the S&P. Sorry, I think this is the whole US market. Yeah. So interesting level here. It's come straight back into this level, which was August this year, which was a bit of a dip. 100 August, yeah. So that was the August dip there. Interesting though that this is still, that is a lot higher. Like that drop was significant over time. We've hit the same levels on a lot of the indicators as we were at after a, what's that? Sorry. After basically a 10% drop, we've hit pretty similar levels across the board as that drop. So we may get a little bit of support here. This might be all we get. Don't necessarily think that's the most likely case at the moment, but it's just some interesting levels. It's a pretty good reset on the market at the moment. Big flush of liquidity. Mag 7's held up pretty good, but I do expect them to come under some pressure just based on this particular chart. Most of them are pretty overextended as well, so they've got a bit to run to the downside. Like Tesla's finding some support here. Even Nvidia's finding a bit of support off the 100 level, which is a decent level for a bounce too. Like if Nvidia's gonna go higher, you probably do want to see a bounce off this particular support level. Yeah, it's not looking great. You could certainly draw this support level down here. it's this region here where if it breaks below the wick from Tuesday, then I'd expect to hit this 116 level. Google's pulling back as well. I don't know whether we'll see a gap close on Google. It's certainly possible. RK, again, don't worry about my shit trend line for some reason, not doing what it was doing before, but yeah, it's pulling back as well. So suggesting obviously there's risk off at the moment, but it hasn't pulled back that far. So it's another indication that things are potentially going to find a base reasonably soon. Meta did break below that trend line. Probably a bit more downside to go. Sorry, that was Amazon. What the f are my trend lines? It's so annoying. Something's fucking trading view, man. Shit. Yeah, Meta actually looks like it's going to pull back a little bit further, potentially only into the 576 sort of level though. There's some vector candles in there. And a fair bit of trading through that level. So momentum's to the downside, but BBWP's resetting. So it's, again, I think this is just a little pullback. AMD breaking. AMD's picking up this vector here. It needs to find some support there though, I think. If AMD breaks down further than that, that's going to look pretty nasty. SMCI, yeah. SML, yeah. Mantis. And these are holding the region, so the fact that these have held reasonably well suggests that it's not the end of the world yet, though these are down significantly from their highs anyway. Still got some interest in them. ASX 200, probably a pretty good level here actually for a bounce on ASX. May come down a little bit further. It'd be interesting if ASX actually does head and shoulders here, because that would be a good level for a bounce, and then obviously you'd probably expect it to come back down, maybe even a little bit further than that, into the 779. Just picking up these vectors in here, and that would recover this vector here. So total crypto market cap, it's pulling back. Kind of want this to find a base as well, but at the moment it looks like it's potentially going to pull back quite a bit. If we pull back, that's a 27% pullback into this vector here as well. So there's certainly a few signs that we should be a little bit concerned, a little bit cautious about more of a pullback. So if you are going to buy the dips, be prepared to sell the rips if you don't want to see your bags go down another 15% or so. But generally, we still haven't broken this range really for stable coins versus Bitcoin. That's interesting. Thought this was going to happen there, but a little bit of a bounce up on this, break that range and then pull back wouldn't be the end of the world. But if we do a 30% pullback, then I would probably expect it to come back up into that 200 EMA, recover this vector candle. ETH BTC longs hasn't really increased. ETH shorts has gone up quite a bit. So these guys are still expecting ETH to drop more. When you start to see this dropping pretty hard, that's probably going to be where it'll find a bit of support. Could be a bit more to go on this though. They're dropping their longs still as well. So BTC USD longs, we covered that. BTC USD shorts is still increasing, so they haven't really closed any of their shorts at the moment. So again, that's signaling potential further downside. ETH BTC, yeah, it's pulling back. So ETH dominance is pulling back as well. BTC dominance is going pretty good. That could potentially touch on the 60% level again. 61. Yeah, we might actually, could be getting something similar to here where we'll get a pullback in this and then it'll run again in terms of dominance. Potentially get back up into these levels again. So around the 70% is a potential target. Maybe a little bit lower, just each cycle is a little bit lower, but not a bad little pullback there on that. It just means alts are getting smashed at the moment, which we know if anyone's got any alts in their bags, it will be getting hammered. ETH may break the value area low here just to pick up this candle. I don't expect it would go much lower than that. The concern though is that ETH has not been of much interest to people in this run. So 23% drop would pick up this vector candle here. Probably go a little bit lower, just into that 29.90. Again, just freak people out, breaking the 3K mark. These vectors here are a little concerning, but I don't think we have to pick them up anytime soon. And if we do a measured, this is a double top here on the daily. I'd probably measure it to there, to be honest. So pull back into the value area, sorry, into the point of control here. 3,500 is certainly on the cards, but then I'd expect that to actually push a bit lower. And interestingly, the bottom of this comes in at 2,990. So playing out that as a measured move, 3K ETH is certainly on the cards. CME, the concern that we have here is CME, there's a big gap at 78, 77. And it's got the potential to pull back quite a bit on stochastic momentum, and BBWP is above the signal line. It's pulling back a little bit, but it looks like it wants to turn around. So what would that move look like? 28% on CME. 30% corrections in Bitcoin bull runs are always an option. They've been there since the start. So this is looking like it's potentially going to be one. So just be careful of that. I'm not saying it will, it's just there's a lot of things pointing to that sort of level. All right. Yeah, as I said in here, we've got the 80. I don't think it'll get there soon. You've really got to see what happens after or around Christmas, New Year. There's typically low liquidity between Christmas and New Year, so be aware of that as well. You can get some pretty decent moves in either direction. Where's the last one? So December. So yeah, actually, I remember that. That was boring as fuck. I was watching the charts. It was choppy, and then it actually had a little pump into the start of January and then pulled back. Could get something similar. As I said, I'm expecting bounces, but December. So this is another thing. So literally 1st of January 2023, if you had bought Bitcoin, you would be laughing because that was very close to the lows. So yeah, January can be a really good month for Bitcoin, but if we're getting near to the highs, it can be pretty shit too, especially if it's on the way down. I do remember this as well. Basically, Christmas was pretty close to the high on that little pump. We had a bit of a Christmas rally, and then it just dumped. Where are we over here? Yeah, whereas back in December 2020, we actually had a pump. We had a really good Christmas, bit of a sideways action, and then a really good Christmas. But I think at the moment we're actually potentially more like we're in this area here, where that was high to low there, 17%, not bad. It's either that or we're ahead of the game and we're actually in this area, which was 31% drop. Okay, so it could be a couple of months or a month ahead on this cycle. And Tom at FX Evolution has been saying that Bitcoin seems to be about a month ahead in its cycle. That's an interesting observation. So yeah, that, not saying it will do 30% because the BlackRock stuff is still coming in. Bitcoin on exchanges is still pretty low, but even back into that level there is interesting. The 76 would be freaking people out. That'd be a touch on the 200 as well, I'd say, by the time we get there. Again, not saying that'll happen. I actually think we'll potentially get more of a bounce into the inauguration later in Jan. So we'll probably find a low reasonably soon, bounce into Jan, and then potentially we could do that drop January, February after the inauguration. And then we'll find a bottom somewhere around here and then move up to another high on sort of a final leg. That would then probably see the end of this bull run, I would say, if we get that high. Global liquidity is still something I'm watching pretty closely here. All right, that'll do. That was a long one. Sorry. Found my second win this morning.